Religion has long taken on the role of answering the biggest questions humans have ever asked. Why do we exist? What is the purpose of life? And what happens after we die? These questions are foundational, yet the way many religions provide answers and defend them is often not based on reason or evidence, but on subtle logical errors that quickly fall apart under scrutiny. When you strip away the cultural, emotional, and traditional elements, what remains is a pattern of flawed arguments, logical fallacies, that cannot withstand serious examination. One of the most common logical errors used by religion is the argument from ignorance. The principle is simple. If you don't know something, then the religious explanation for it must be true. For example, when science cannot fully explain the origin of life, people say, "It must be God." When human consciousness remains a mystery, they claim it is divine. At first, this seems plausible, but it's actually a serious logical mistake. Just because something is unknown does not prove any particular answer is correct. It's like saying, if you don't know who ate the last cookie, it must have been a ghost. Not knowing something doesn't justify a conclusion, especially one made thousands of years before modern science existed. This fallacy is popular because it satisfies emotions. Humans dislike uncertainty and the feeling of being out of control. We crave clear answers and stable beliefs to hold on to. Religion exploits this need. From believing thunder was caused by angry gods to thinking disease was punishment for sin, human history is full of examples of filling gaps with supernatural explanations that led us astray. It feels safe, but truth does not care about comfort. Truth exists independently of how reassuring it may feel. Another frequent error is appeal to tradition. Religion often persists, not because it is true, but because it has lasted a long time. People say, this belief has existed for thousands of years, so it must be true. But longevity does not prove truth. Bad ideas can last just as long as good ones. Bloodletting, for example, was common medical practice for over 2,000 years. It lasted that long, but it was ineffective. Age alone does not make something correct. Closely related is the bandwagon fallacy, or belief based on popularity. Billions of people believing in a religion doesn't make it true. At one point, nearly everyone believed the earth was flat. Popularity reflects repetition, not truth. Just because many people believe something doesn't mean it is correct. Another tool religion often uses is appeal to authority. Religious texts and leaders are frequently treated as beyond question, but a claim is only as valid as the evidence supporting it. If someone told you that invisible fairies lived in their backyard, you would want proof, not titles or credentials. Using authority instead of evidence is a serious logical problem. Linked to appeal to authority is circular reasoning. For example, the Bible is true because it is the Word of God, and God exists because the Bible says so. This is a closed loop, disconnected from reality. The conclusion is assumed in the premise, creating an argument that proves itself without real support. False dilemmas also appear often. Either religion is true or life has no meaning. Either God created the universe or it came from nothing. These options force extreme choices and ignore other possibilities. In reality, the universe and life can have meaning without divine intervention. Black and white thinking like this oversimplifies the complexity of reality. Another common tactic is special pleading, giving religion exceptions that no other claim gets. When contradictions or logical holes are pointed out, the response is often, God works in mysterious ways, or faith doesn't require evidence. Extraordinary claims outside religion would not be accepted without proof, yet religious claims are treated as off-limits. Truth does not require special treatment. It stands or falls on evidence. There's also non sequitur, conclusions that do not follow from the premise. For example, the universe is complex, so it must have been designed. Complexity does not imply design. Natural phenomena like snowflakes or hurricanes form intricate patterns without conscious intent. Seeing patterns does not mean there is a pattern maker. Finally, emotions are often used as a persuasive tool. Emotional appeals exploit fear or hope, fear of hell, hope of heaven, comfort in believing a loved one still exists somewhere. These feelings are strong, but they do not make a belief true. Wanting something to be true does not make it so. Belief based on emotion may provide comfort, but it does not replace objective evidence. In short, Analyzing the basic logic of religion reveals reliance on arguments from ignorance, tradition, authority, circular reasoning, and emotion rather than evidence or reason. Religion satisfies the human need for certainty and security, but it does not provide truly rational, testable answers. Truth, unlike comfort or tradition, exists independently and can only be approached through thought, analysis, and evidence. Another major factor supporting religious belief is confirmation bias, the tendency to notice and remember only the things that support an existing belief while ignoring evidence to the contrary. For example, if someone prays for a positive outcome and it happens, they often interpret it as proof that their prayer worked. If something bad happens, it's explained away as a test of faith or part of a divine plan. Everything becomes proof of the system, but when everything counts as proof, nothing truly does. Evidence must be testable and falsifiable. Otherwise, interpretations are filtered through personal desire rather than reality. Closely related is post hoc reasoning, often used in miracle claims. This is the assumption that because event B followed event A must have caused event B. For instance, someone prays and later recovers from illness. But correlation is not causation. Recoveries happen naturally all the time, with or without prayer. Unless all other factors are ruled out, connecting dots in this way is misleading. The human brain naturally searches for patterns, but not all patterns imply intentional causation. One of the oldest and most pervasive errors is the argument from design. The claim is that because the universe appears well-suited for life, it must have been intentionally created for us. However, this misunderstands how adaptation works. Life did not emerge because the universe was designed for it. Life adapted to the conditions present. Evolution explains how complex forms emerge without a designer. Saying the universe was fine-tuned for us is like standing in a puddle and assuming the puddle was made just for your feet. Things fit because life adjusted to them, not the other way around. Religion also leans heavily on anecdotal evidence, personal experiences presented as universal proof. A feeling of presence during prayer or a vivid dream is taken as divine validation. Yet personal experience is inherently unreliable. Cognitive biases, suggestion, and cultural conditioning affect everyone. People across different religions report similar experiences that contradict each other. They cannot all be accurate, yet the argument is treated as if one person's experience proves universal truth. Cherry-picking reinforces this. Religious texts are full of contradictions, but believers selectively emphasize passages that align with moral ideals while ignoring violent or irrational parts. If a text is claimed to be the word of a perfect being, it should not require selective reading to appear ethical. Ignoring inconvenient sections is not evidence of divinity. It is a human editing choice. Begging the question is another subtle fallacy. This occurs when the premise assumes the conclusion it tries to prove. For example, the Bible is true because it is God's word, assumes both God exists and that the Bible is his word without evidence. This circular reasoning pretends to provide proof, but ultimately adds nothing. Religious reasoning also exhibits the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where patterns are found after the fact and treated as proof. A vague prophecy is considered fulfilled once an event occurs, even if the prophecy could have referred to anything. Retroactive fitting of predictions is misleading. True prediction requires specificity before the event occurs. Another frequent tactic is the no true Scotsman fallacy, which redefines the group to protect belief from criticism. If a believer acts immorally, others claim they weren't a true believer. If they act morally, they are celebrated as exemplary. This double standard shields the system from scrutiny while preserving its reputation. Religion also depends on loaded language. Words like holy, sacred, and blessed are designed to evoke emotion, shutting down critical thought. Labeling something as sacred doesn't make it rational. It simply discourages questioning by instilling fear of disrespect. Moving the goalposts is common. When a literal interpretation of Scripture fails, believers claim it was metaphorical. When a prophecy does not come true, they reinterpret it. When prayers appear unanswered, they assert the answer was unseen. Constantly changing the criteria prevents falsification, ensuring the claim remains unchallengeable. Pascal's wager is another method that functions like a fallacy. It argues that believing in God is the safest bet because the reward is eternal happiness and disbelief risks punishment. Yet belief cannot be switched on out of fear, and with thousands of religions, choosing one correct faith is just as uncertain. True belief should rest on evidence, not on risk avoidance. Religious language often uses mystification, confusing complexity for depth. Dense theological jargon sounds profound, but frequently lacks clarity or meaning. Terms like eternal grace and divine presence create the illusion of understanding without providing real explanation. Clarity is replaced by ambiguity. Compartmentalization is also a logical tactic. Believers may live rational, evidence-based lives, but treat religion as a separate, unquestionable domain. Science, finance, and daily decision-making are approached logically, yet faith is given a pass. Truth doesn't require a special bubble. If an idea cannot survive outside its compartment, it is a warning sign, not a strength. Finally, doubt is often treated as a threat. Questioning is discouraged, maintaining control rather than seeking truth. Systems that punish skepticism prioritize obedience over understanding. When combined with slippery slope arguments in moral debates, subjective experience treated as universal truth, incredulity claims, "I can't imagine this naturally, so it must be God," and equivocation, religious reasoning repeatedly substitutes perception, fear, and emotion for evidence. The pattern is clear. Religion relies on cognitive biases, circular logic, selective interpretation, emotional manipulation, and appeals to authority or tradition. These fallacies create a framework where belief is insulated from evidence, scrutiny, or disproof. The structure is psychologically persuasive, but logically fragile. Understanding these mechanisms helps separate what humans wish were true from what can be rationally defended. Another major flaw in religious thinking is anthropocentrism, the idea that humans are the central purpose of the universe. Many religious systems present humanity as the focus of creation, as if the cosmos exists for our benefit. But the observable universe is vast, hostile, and indifferent. Trillions of galaxies contain billions of stars, most of which are incapable of supporting life. Earth is a tiny, fragile speck. Believing the universe revolves around us is not humble. It is self-centered. Religion often appeals to ego rather than reason, presenting humans as special without evidence to support it. Closely related is teleological thinking, the assumption that everything exists for a purpose assigned by a higher power. Religion teaches that events happen to us or for us. Natural phenomena are framed as lessons or tests. Lions do not eat gazelles to teach humans a lesson. Hurricanes do not strike with moral intent. Nature operates without conscious purpose. Meaning is human-made, not cosmic. True meaning arises when we assign value to our experiences, relationships, and creativity, rather than relying on a supposed divine blueprint. Religious reasoning also misuses authority through numbers, claiming that widespread belief validates truth. Ancient civilizations believed in gods, so religion must be credible, according to this logic. But popularity is not proof. People once believed the sun revolved around the earth, that epilepsy was demonic possession, and that slavery was natural. Tradition preserves ideas, but it does not guarantee their accuracy. Religion often presents a false balance in public discourse. When criticized, religious views are given equal weight alongside evidence-based science, regardless of merit. This suggests all ideas are equally valid, which is misleading. Not all claims are equivalent. Treating unverified beliefs as equal to tested knowledge confuses the public and implies legitimacy where none exists. The authority structure within religion also reveals contradictions. If God is perfect, why rely on flawed human intermediaries like priests, prophets, and popes? These individuals often contradict each other, make mistakes, and misuse power. Why use ancient texts with translation issues to communicate eternal truths? The logic of divine messaging is inconsistent and often impractical, raising questions about credibility. Religious language frequently exhibits vagueness. Terms like spirit, soul, or divine energy lack clear definitions. 10 people can give 10 different explanations of the same term. If a concept is undefined, it cannot be tested. Without testability, it cannot be claimed as real. Vagueness protects belief from scrutiny, but it does not establish truth. A particularly insidious tactic is moral blackmail, claiming that criticism of religion is offensive or disrespectful. While individuals deserve respect for their rights, ideas do not. Examining beliefs is not an attack on people, it is a search for truth. If a belief cannot withstand scrutiny, it does not deserve authority over public life or policy. False analogies are common, such as comparing the universe to a watch. A watch implies a maker because we understand how watches are made. The universe, however, is not comparable. We lack a frame of reference for its creation. Complexity alone is insufficient to claim design without supporting evidence. Analogies may explain ideas, but do not prove them. Religious thinkers also redefine words to support claims. Nothing is reinterpreted to argue that the universe could not have arisen naturally. Atheism may be framed as just another belief system to make it seem equally speculative. Manipulating definitions is intellectually dishonest and misleads rather than clarifies. Precision matters when evaluating reality. The appeal to consequences is another frequent tactic. Religious arguments suggest life without God is meaningless, morality would collapse, or society would disintegrate. Yet the truth of a claim is independent of whether it produces comfort or fear. Desiring eternal security or a perfect afterlife does not make either real. Beliefs should stand on evidence, not emotional appeal. Another error is the argument from personal incredulity, the claim that because one cannot imagine a natural explanation, a supernatural cause must exist. Difficulty understanding a phenomenon is not proof of divine intervention. I don't know. Therefore, God shuts the door to real inquiry, turning a dead end into a supposed answer. Religious language also often uses a bait and switch. God is initially presented as a vague philosophical or first cause concept. Once accepted, it shifts subtly to a specific deity with rules, rituals, and texts. Proving the universe had a beginning does not prove the God of any religion. The leap to a particular deity is where the logic fails. Moral outsourcing is another concern. Religion teaches that morality comes from divine command, not personal reasoning. If morality depends entirely on a deity, obedience replaces judgment. Acts like genocide, slavery, or intolerance become justified if commanded. True morality requires reasoning about right and wrong, independent of external orders. Religion often distorts humility, equating it with guilt and dependency. Believers are taught they are broken, sinful, or fallen, needing submission to a higher will. Genuine humility is recognizing limitations and remaining open to evidence, not feeling worthless or subordinate. Confusing obedience with virtue prevents personal growth and independent judgment. The halo effect also affects religious reasoning. Leaders and texts gain automatic credibility due to perceived holiness or authority. Charisma, tradition, and attire do not guarantee truth. Blind trust in figures simply because of status often leads to harm, deception, or abuse. A final critical issue is the failure to define falsifiability. Religious claims are often insulated from testing. If every possible outcome supports belief, success as proof, failure as a test, then the claim explains everything but predicts nothing. Without falsifiability, a system is a belief bubble, not a source of knowledge. One of the most foundational issues in religion is faith itself, the idea that believing without evidence is virtuous. Faith is often portrayed as strength, but in reality, it is surrender. It halts inquiry, placing intellectual integrity in the hands of authority or tradition. Faith prioritizes certainty over curiosity. Truth, on the other hand, relies on understanding and evidence. It adapts when new information arises. Faith, by contrast, demands obedience and resistance to change. This fundamental difference shapes the way believers approach the world, privileging adherence over critical thought. Religion often claims to give life meaning, suggesting that without it, people face existential voids. This relies on a flawed assumption that meaning must be handed down from above rather than created by individuals. Human beings constantly create meaning through relationships, creativity, exploration, learning, and compassion. Assuming meaning must be absolute and eternal to be real is a fallacy. The meaning in our lives is real because we live it. It does not require divine authorship. Closely tied to this is the appeal to the comfort of finality. Religious stories often have neat arcs, beginnings, purposes, judgments, and resolutions. These narratives provide psychological comfort, but life is rarely so orderly. The universe has no inherent storyline. Events do not resolve neatly. Wanting a definitive answer, A cosmic parent or a happy ending does not make one exist. Satisfying desires for closure does not establish truth. It only offers temporary comfort, much like a bedtime story. Religion also offers shortcuts. It provides immediate answers to difficult questions, bypassing the uncertainty inherent in life. While convenient, these shortcuts come at a cost. They discourage independent thinking and reduce curiosity. Questions are framed as threats rather than opportunities. Mystery is resolved with dogma instead of discovery. By replacing inquiry with prepackaged answers, believers are shielded from learning processes that could lead to genuine understanding. A further complication is identity entanglement. Religious belief is not simply a set of ideas. It becomes intertwined with personal identity. Worth, social belonging, and perceived eternal destiny are often contingent upon adherence. Doubt, even honest questioning, feels like betrayal. When belief becomes identity, argument becomes personal, and evidence loses relevance. Ideas should stand or fall on merit alone, independent of how they shape someone's self-concept. Another subtle yet powerful factor is survivorship bias. Religious narratives frequently highlight individuals whose lives were improved by belief, while neglecting those harmed, misled, or abused. Survivors who suffered often remain silent due to fear, guilt, or social pressure. The visible, celebrated stories create a skewed impression of religious efficacy, much like showcasing only a few winners in a casino. Highlighting selective successes does not prove the system is beneficial or fair. False urgency is a related tactic. Religion often pressures adherents to accept beliefs immediately, emphasizing the eternal stakes of their choices. This rush discourages reflection and critical evaluation. Decisions made under duress or fear are less likely to be rational. Truth, unlike urgency, does not expire. If a claim is true, it remains so regardless of how quickly one accepts it. Pressure undermines clarity and fosters compliance rather than understanding. Religion frequently treats belief as morally superior by default, a type of virtue by association fallacy. The assumption is that believers are inherently good, while non-believers are morally suspect. Belief, however, does not guarantee ethical behavior. Many adherents commit harmful acts, and many non-believers live ethically exemplary lives. Morality is determined by actions, not creed. Blind trust in individuals based solely on belief can result in ethical errors and misplaced confidence. Emotional conditioning is another powerful mechanism. From childhood, believers are trained to associate religious adherence with love, safety, and reward, while doubt is linked to punishment, fear, or ostracism. This creates anxiety around questioning and fosters automatic compliance. True belief requires informed consent, not coercive conditioning. Fear and guilt should not substitute for reasoned conviction, yet religion often employs these tactics systematically. Linguistic ambiguity in religious texts compounds the issue. Many scriptures are vague, metaphorical, or poetic, allowing almost any interpretation. Two individuals can read the same passage and extract contradictory meanings. Flexibility is defended as a strength, but it renders beliefs unfalsifiable. A text that can justify both peace and violence, kindness and cruelty, is not a reliable guide. It reflects projection, not truth. Historical revisionism is another concern. Organized religion often sanitizes its past, presenting a noble lineage while downplaying atrocities like the Crusades, Inquisitions, or witch trials. While some view these events as historical anomalies, systemic abuses over centuries indicate structural flaws rather than isolated misdeeds. Understanding religion's historical context requires acknowledging not just exceptional stories, but patterns of harm. Religious discourse also engages in scientific appropriation, misusing scientific terms like quantum energy, fine-tuning, or information theory to lend credibility to ancient texts. Science is empirical, testable, and self-correcting. Stripping concepts of context to align with scripture is not scientific reasoning. It is cosmetic. Updating old myths with scientific language improves presentation, not validity. Projection is another recurring tactic. Believers may accuse non-believers of the flaws they themselves exhibit, closed-mindedness, dogmatism, or irrationality. Some even claim that secularism is a form of religion. Disbelief is not a system of beliefs. It is simply the absence of unproven claims. Mischaracterizing non-belief as equivalent to belief is intellectually dishonest and confuses discussion. Finally, the most pervasive issue is the illusion of certainty. Religion promises answers to life's ultimate questions, purpose, afterlife, and absolute truth. This certainty is not earned through evidence, but borrowed from tradition, repetition, authority, and emotional appeal. While comforting, it often obstructs genuine understanding. Uncertainty is not weakness, it is the foundation of inquiry. Saying, "I don't know," is the most honest and intellectually responsible response to the mysteries of existence. Curiosity, not dogma, is the true strength of the human mind. Religion is built on centuries of tradition, emotion, and authority. But beneath the surface, the arguments supporting belief are a patchwork of logical fallacies, appeals to ignorance, emotional manipulation, circular reasoning, and special exceptions, all reinforced by the illusion of certainty. Reality does not require sanctity to be meaningful. Life does not need eternity to matter. We exist within a vast, indifferent universe, yet this indifference provides freedom, the freedom to create meaning, purpose, and connection. Not because it is dictated, but because it is possible. Truth does not ask for faith, it asks for evidence. It does not fear questions, it welcomes them, one inquiry at a time. When we dissect organized religion, it becomes clear that many of its strategies are psychological rather than rational. Belief as a social mechanism is powerful. Religions often tie identity, community, and belonging to adherence. Conformity is rewarded, dissent is discouraged. From an early age, believers are conditioned to equate doubt with danger or moral failure. This makes questioning difficult, even when logical inconsistencies or ethical concerns arise. The social reinforcement of belief ensures stability, but it does not guarantee truth. One of the subtler forms of control is moral outsourcing. Followers are taught that moral authority resides with a deity rather than personal judgment. This can lead to dangerous consequences. If morality comes solely from divine command, then obedience replaces ethical reasoning. Harmful acts may be justified because they are framed as divinely sanctioned. Real morality requires evaluating actions on their intrinsic merits, not relying on external authority. Without personal responsibility, ethical reflection is diminished and critical thinking is stifled. Religious systems also manipulate perceptions of humility. Believers are often told they are inherently flawed, sinful, or broken, with submission to divine will as the only path to redemption. This is not genuine humility, it is dependency. True humility involves recognizing limitations, being open to evidence, and acknowledging one's capacity for error. Religion frequently conflates guilt with humility and obedience with virtue, encouraging reliance on authority rather than cultivating internal moral judgment. Another psychological tactic is the halo effect, where the perceived sanctity of religious leaders or texts transfers credibility to their claims. Just because someone is revered, charismatic, or has worn symbols of authority does not make their ideas true. History is filled with examples of respected clergy and prophets misleading followers or committing harm. The focus should be on the content of claims, not the status of those presenting them. A related concern is the failure to define falsifiability. Many religious claims are constructed in such a way that they cannot be tested or disproven. If success is framed as divine favor and failure as a test or mystery, then the belief system explains everything, but predicts nothing. Without testability, a claim cannot be evaluated against reality. Real knowledge requires the ability to disprove or challenge a claim. Otherwise, it remains a closed narrative, immune to scrutiny. False attribution is also common. Religion often claims credit for human achievements in morality, art, or law. However, these have existed independently of religious frameworks. Secular societies demonstrate justice, creativity, and empathy without relying on divine command. Believing that these aspects of civilization originated solely from religion ignores the broader scope of human innovation and ethical development. Human achievement is grounded in culture, cooperation, and reasoning, not divinely dictated. At the core of religious thinking is faith as a virtue, the idea that belief without evidence is commendable. But such faith does not reflect strength, it reflects surrender. It discourages questioning and critical examination, replacing curiosity with unquestioning adherence. Faith prioritizes certainty, often at the expense of understanding. Reason, conversely, relies on evidence, adapts to new information, and embraces uncertainty as a starting point for inquiry. Another issue is the illusion that life's meaning depends on religion. Many religious narratives insist that without adherence, existence lacks purpose. This assumes that meaning must be externally assigned rather than personally created. In reality, people generate meaning constantly through relationships, art, exploration, learning, and acts of compassion. Meaning exists because it is actively experienced, not because it is dictated by an external authority. The insistence on absolute eternal meaning is a psychological construct rather than a reflection of reality. Closely tied to this is the comfort of narrative closure. Religious stories often present neatly wrapped arcs with beginnings, purposes, and resolutions. This satisfies a human desire for order and predictability. Life, however, rarely follows such structured patterns. Reality is unpredictable, often chaotic, and lacks inherent moral arcs. Seeking closure through religious narratives offers emotional comfort, but it does not establish factual accuracy. It satisfies a desire, not a truth. Religion also offers cognitive shortcuts. By providing ready-made answers to complex questions, it reduces uncertainty. While convenient, these shortcuts come at the expense of critical thinking. Questions are treated as threats. Curiosity is discouraged, and mystery is resolved with dogma rather than exploration. By privileging certainty over investigation, religion fosters compliance instead of understanding. Identity entanglement further complicates rational evaluation. Belief is tightly linked to social identity, personal value, and perceived eternal destiny. Questioning one's faith can feel like personal betrayal. When belief is intertwined with identity, argument becomes emotional, and evidence is often dismissed. Ideas should be judged on merit, not on how integral they are to one's sense of self. Survivorship bias reinforces the illusion of efficacy. Religious communities highlight success stories while marginalizing accounts of harm or disillusionment. Stories of positive transformation are amplified, creating a skewed perception of benefit. Silence from those harmed, whether from fear or guilt, distorts reality. Highlighting a few successes does not validate the system. It reflects selective reporting. False urgency pressures individuals to commit to beliefs quickly, emphasizing eternal stakes and immediate decisions. This manipulation reduces the opportunity for reflection and informed choice. Truth, however, is not bound by time constraints. A claim's validity is independent of how quickly it is accepted. Pressure encourages compliance, not clarity or understanding. Religion frequently implies moral superiority by association, suggesting that believers are inherently virtuous. Yet ethical behavior is not guaranteed by faith. Non-believers can act morally, and believers can commit harm. Moral judgment should be based on behavior, not creed. Equating belief with goodness creates blind trust in some and unwarranted skepticism toward others. Emotional conditioning from a young age reinforces compliance. Positive reinforcement associates belief with love and reward, while doubt is linked to punishment or fear. This emotional conditioning discourages independent thought. Genuine belief should arise from reasoned consent, not fear or manipulation. Linguistic ambiguity in sacred texts allows multiple interpretations, making beliefs unfalsifiable. Flexibility in interpretation is often framed as a strength, but it undermines clarity. A text that can justify both peace and violence does not provide a reliable moral or factual guide. It reflects subjective projection rather than objective truth. Historical revisionism is another major tactic used to preserve the image of organized religion. Over centuries, believers and religious institutions have sanitized the past, presenting a noble or virtuous tradition while minimizing or reframing atrocities. Events like the Crusades, Inquisitions, witch trials, and other systemic abuses are often downplayed, explained away as misunderstandings, or attributed to a few rogue individuals. However, when a belief system holds immense power, these are not random errors. They are symptoms of structural and doctrinal issues. The frameworks that enabled widespread harm need critical examination because the repetition of such patterns across generations suggests systemic flaws rather than isolated incidents. Another modern strategy is scientific appropriation, where religious thinkers co-opt scientific terminology to lend credibility to age-old beliefs. Terms like quantum energy, fine-tuning, or information theory are often cited in support of theological claims. Yet this is usually a superficial application, stripped of empirical context. Real science relies on evidence, hypothesis testing, reproducibility, and adaptation to new findings. Religion, in these cases, borrows the language without the method. Reframing ancient narratives in contemporary scientific terms does not transform them into verified knowledge. It merely dresses them in a more persuasive costume. Projection is also prevalent. Religious adherents often accuse skeptics or non-believers of being close-minded, dogmatic, or immoral, all while refusing to examine their own convictions. They may label secularism as another form of religion, equating disbelief with active belief. This is a misrepresentation. Non-belief is not a positive claim. It is the absence of a specific claim. To equate the absence of belief with adherence to an alternative dogma is a false equivalence. The illusion of certainty is perhaps the most insidious aspect of organized religion. Believers are assured that they can know ultimate truths, the purpose of life, what happens after death, or the fundamental nature of reality. This certainty is borrowed from tradition, repetition, authority, and emotional reinforcement rather than derived from evidence. While comforting, it discourages deeper inquiry and critical thinking. Real understanding begins with admitting uncertainty, asking questions, and embracing the discomfort of the unknown. Admitting, "I don't know," is not a weakness. It is the most honest response in the face of mystery. Human intellect thrives not by clinging to predefined answers, but by pursuing better questions. Curiosity, not certainty, is the engine of discovery. The willingness to let go of comforting narratives when evidence contradicts them is a sign of intellectual strength, not failure. Organized religion often discourages this, preferring compliance and acceptance over independent reasoning and exploration. Much of religious belief is reinforced by centuries of tradition, power, and emotional conditioning. Yet when we analyze the logic supporting these beliefs, we find a house of cards built on fallacies. Appeals to ignorance, misused authority, circular reasoning, emotional manipulation, special pleading, false dilemmas, and non sequiturs create a framework that appears solid only because questioning is discouraged. The perceived strength of religious doctrine often stems from social reinforcement rather than factual validity. At its core, organized religion replaces curiosity with obedience and understanding with ritual. Emotional leverage plays a significant role. Fear of divine punishment, hope of eternal reward, and the social pressure of belonging all create a psychological environment where critical thinking is suppressed. Faith is often conflated with virtue, certainty with truth, and submission with morality. This environment makes it difficult for individuals to step back and assess the logical coherence of the claims they are asked to accept. Religious belief also relies heavily on identity entanglement. A person's faith is not just a set of ideas. It becomes intertwined with their sense of self, community membership, and perceived eternal destiny. Doubting these beliefs is psychologically framed as a personal betrayal. Arguments about logic or evidence are filtered through emotion, making reason secondary. When belief defines identity, no evidence can easily dislodge it, and no rational critique can proceed without being perceived as an attack. Survivorship bias further skews perception. Religious communities highlight stories of lives transformed for the better by faith, while ignoring or suppressing countless instances of harm, disillusionment, or abuse. Those affected may remain silent due to fear, shame, or social consequences. The selective amplification of success stories creates a misleading picture of efficacy. Just like a few winners in a casino do not prove the fairness of the game, a few positive testimonials do not validate an entire belief system. Another manipulation is false urgency. Religious systems often pressure individuals to make immediate, lifelong commitments, emphasizing eternal stakes or impending judgment. This tactic leverages fear and social pressure, curtailing thoughtful examination. Truth, however, is timeless. It does not need to be accepted under duress. Systems that demand immediate belief prioritize control over understanding. Religion often assumes moral superiority by default. Believers are presented as inherently ethical, while non-believers are implicitly suspect. This is a form of virtue by association fallacy. Ethical behavior is not guaranteed by belief. Morality is enacted through actions, empathy, and reason. Confusing faith with goodness fosters blind trust and misdirected skepticism. Non-believers can act morally, and believers can commit harm. Belief alone is not a reliable indicator of ethical behavior. Emotional conditioning from a young age reinforces compliance and discourages independent thought. Positive reinforcement links belief with safety, love, and reward, while doubt is associated with fear, punishment, or alienation. Such conditioning does not foster genuine belief. It instills obedience. True conviction arises from informed consent and personal reasoning, not from fear or coercion. Linguistic ambiguity in religious texts allows for multiple interpretations. Metaphor and poetic expression often create vagueness, making beliefs unfalsifiable. A text that can simultaneously justify peace and violence, freedom and slavery, kindness and cruelty does not provide a clear moral or factual guide. Instead, it functions as a mirror, reflecting the desires and biases of the interpreter rather than an objective truth. Finally, organized religion benefits from group reinforcement and social pressure. Conformity is rewarded, dissent is marginalized. Questioning is framed as dangerous or disrespectful. These dynamics create a stable belief environment, but stability does not equate to truth. Collective adherence often masks logical inconsistencies, ethical shortcomings, and evidential gaps. Reality is not determined by majority vote, tradition, or emotional resonance. It exists independently of belief. Another subtle but powerful mechanism that sustains organized religion is survivorship bias in storytelling. Religious institutions emphasize and celebrate the lives of those whose faith appears to have brought extraordinary results, healing, or moral clarity. These stories are highly visible, repeated across sermons, literature, and media. Meanwhile, the countless individuals who suffered, were misled, or experienced harm within the same systems often remain unheard. Fear, shame, or social pressure keeps them silent. This selective amplification creates the illusion that the system reliably produces good outcomes, when in reality, only a small fraction of experiences are being highlighted. Much like a few winning gamblers in a casino, their success does not validate the fairness or reliability of the entire structure. It merely skews perception through repetition and emotional appeal. Closely linked to this is the tactic of false urgency. Many religious teachings insist that one's eternal destiny is at immediate risk. Decisions about faith are framed as urgent, irreversible, and infinitely consequential. Believers are told they must commit without delay, often under the weight of fear, guilt, or social expectation. This is a psychological lever designed to bypass critical thinking, encourage rapid acceptance, and discourage careful inquiry. Truth, by contrast, is not on a deadline. Genuine understanding does not rely on pressure or haste. It can be examined, questioned, and refined over time. Systems that demand immediate assent prioritize control over insight. Another pervasive mechanism is the assumption of moral superiority by association, where adherence to a religion is automatically equated with virtue. This is a type of virtue by association fallacy, suggesting that if a person believes, they are inherently good. Conversely, non-believers are implicitly framed as morally suspect or lacking. This conflation of belief with ethical behavior is misleading. Morality is demonstrated through actions, empathy, and reasoning, not mere acceptance of doctrines. Many believers have committed harm, and many non-believers act with profound integrity. Belief is not a reliable moral compass. It is a framework that can guide, constrain, or misdirect behavior depending on interpretation and social context. Emotional conditioning plays a substantial role in reinforcing religious adherence. From early childhood, individuals are often trained to associate faith with safety, love, family approval, and reward, while doubt is associated with fear, punishment, isolation, or eternal damnation. This conditioning operates unconsciously, shaping the individual's perception of belief as essential and dissent as threatening. True faith cannot exist under coercion, guilt, or fear. When belief is the product of psychological manipulation rather than informed reasoning, it is obedience, not understanding. Children and adults alike may come to equate emotional comfort with truth, suppressing inquiry and curiosity in favor of conformity. Linguistic ambiguity in religious texts further reinforces adherence while avoiding falsification. Scriptures are often poetic, metaphorical, or deliberately vague, allowing for multiple, sometimes contradictory interpretations. A single passage may be read to justify peace or violence, freedom or oppression, kindness or cruelty. This flexibility is often defended as strength or wisdom, but in truth, it makes the text unfalsifiable. If a holy book can be used to support opposing outcomes simultaneously, it ceases to function as a clear guide to moral or factual reality. Instead, it becomes a mirror, reflecting the beliefs, desires, and biases of the reader rather than offering objective insight. Closely related is the reframing of contradictions and inconvenient truths through historical revisionism. Religious narratives frequently sanitize the past, presenting an idealized version of the tradition while minimizing systemic failures or atrocities. Events like the Crusades, Inquisitions, witch trials, and religiously sanctioned violence are often attributed to isolated bad actors or explained as misunderstandings. Yet the repetition of similar abuses across centuries points to structural problems, not mere anomalies. When power is centralized and unaccountable, harm becomes embedded in the institution itself. Understanding religion's history requires examining patterns, systems, and mechanisms, not just individual actors. Scientific appropriation is another method used to bolster authority. Religious thinkers often co-opt scientific concepts such as quantum theory, information theory, or the fine-tuning argument to lend modern credibility to ancient beliefs. However, this is generally superficial. Terminology is borrowed without the underlying methodology of hypothesis, testing, falsification, or peer review. Real science evolves with new data and revises its conclusions. Religion, in these cases, uses the veneer of science to legitimize claims that are not empirically substantiated. Dressing ancient myths in scientific language enhances persuasiveness without improving accuracy. Projection is frequently employed. Believers may accuse non-believers of close-mindedness, dogmatism, or moral deficiency, even while refusing to examine or question their own assumptions. Secularism may be labeled as just another religion, a false equivalence that ignores the distinction between active belief and the absence of belief. Non-belief is not a worldview in itself. It is a lack of subscription to a specific claim. Treating it as equivalent to a structured belief system is misleading and illogical. Perhaps the most pervasive and dangerous tactic is the illusion of certainty. Organized religion often promises knowledge of ultimate truths, what happens after death, the purpose of life, and the nature of reality. This certainty is not earned through evidence, but borrowed from tradition, repetition, authority, and emotional reinforcement. While psychologically comforting, it discourages inquiry and critical thinking. True understanding begins with recognizing uncertainty. Admitting "I don't know" is a strength, not a failure. It opens the door to curiosity, exploration, and learning. The human mind thrives on questions, not rigid answers. Clinging to predefined beliefs discourages curiosity and critical reasoning. Religious systems often prioritize compliance over comprehension, teaching that comfort and obedience are more valuable than inquiry and insight. Emotional leverage, through fear of punishment, hope for reward, and social reinforcement, ensures adherence and discourages dissent. Faith is conflated with virtue, certainty with truth, and submission with morality. Such an environment makes logical analysis secondary to conformity. Belief is often entwined with identity, making it psychologically difficult to question. If faith is tied to self-worth, social belonging, and eternal destiny, doubt feels like betrayal. In these circumstances, arguments based on logic, evidence, or reason are filtered through emotion, making them ineffective. Belief becomes insulated, protected not by its own merit, but by social, emotional, and psychological entanglements. Survivorship bias, false urgency, moral by association, emotional conditioning, linguistic ambiguity, historical revisionism, scientific appropriation, projection, and the illusion of certainty all combine to create a system where questioning is discouraged, dissent is punished, and adherence is psychologically reinforced. The stability of religious belief is maintained less by truth and more by social, emotional, and cognitive mechanisms that discourage scrutiny. Finally, organized religion often presents itself as offering meaning, purpose, and moral guidance, while simultaneously discouraging independent reasoning. By substituting external authority for personal investigation, it encourages reliance on repetition, ritual, and tradition rather than understanding. Faith is rewarded with emotional comfort, social belonging, and perceived moral guidance. But critical examination and independent inquiry are often treated as threats to the system. Continuing from these psychological and logical mechanisms, it's important to consider how religion offers shortcuts in understanding reality. Life is complex, uncertain, and often uncomfortable. Religion presents tidy answers, simple moral rules, and narratives that reduce ambiguity. Questions about existence, suffering, morality, and the afterlife are answered with pre-packaged explanations. This is seductive because it minimizes doubt and emotional discomfort. Yet these shortcuts come at a cost. They discourage independent thinking, curiosity, and critical reflection. Questions are framed as threats rather than opportunities. Mystery is replaced with dogma rather than explored with inquiry. Religious belief frequently becomes entwined with identity, making it extraordinarily resistant to change. When faith is positioned as a core part of one's self-worth, social belonging, and even eternal destiny, doubt feels not only uncomfortable, but dangerous. To question or reconsider becomes a form of personal betrayal. In such an environment, logic and evidence are filtered through emotional and social pressures. Beliefs are insulated from critique, not because they are inherently valid, but because they are psychologically protected by identity and conformity. Arguments based on reason often fail, not due to their quality, but because the believer's sense of self is invested in maintaining them. Another major factor is survivorship bias in religious storytelling. Institutions highlight stories of individuals whose lives were apparently transformed or blessed by faith, creating a disproportionate impression of reliability and moral efficacy. The countless individuals who were misled, harmed, or oppressed within the same systems are rarely amplified. Fear, shame, or social pressure keeps them silent. This selective storytelling skews perception, making the religion appear more effective and morally sound than the broader reality supports. Success is emphasized, failure is minimized, and the narrative becomes a tool of reinforcement rather than a reflection of evidence. False urgency compounds these pressures. Religious teachings often frame faith as an urgent necessity, asserting that eternal consequences hang on immediate belief. Hasty commitment is encouraged, and reflection or doubt is discouraged. This pressure undermines careful reasoning, prioritizing compliance over understanding. Truth is not bound by deadlines. Genuine insight can withstand time and scrutiny. Systems that demand immediate assent prioritize control, not enlightenment. The assumption of moral superiority by association is another common tactic. Belief is equated with virtue. Non-belief is implicitly framed as morally deficient. This is misleading because morality is measured by actions, empathy, and reasoning, not mere adherence to doctrine. Many believers have committed harmful acts, while many non-believers act with integrity and compassion. Equating belief with goodness creates a blind spot that misleads people about who is ethical or trustworthy. Emotional conditioning is fundamental to sustaining belief. From early childhood, people are trained to associate faith with comfort, love, reward, and acceptance, while doubt is linked to punishment, isolation, or spiritual danger. This creates a reflexive attachment to belief, conditioning individuals to fear questioning and to equate emotional security with truth. True faith cannot be based on fear or guilt. It must emerge from informed reasoning. Emotional manipulation produces obedience, not understanding. Linguistic ambiguity in religious texts allows nearly any interpretation, providing flexibility while avoiding falsification. Scriptures are often poetic, metaphorical, or intentionally vague, making them unfalsifiable. A single passage may justify contradictory moral or factual positions, functioning as a mirror that reflects the reader's biases rather than objective truth. The flexibility is often celebrated as profundity, but in practice, it shields beliefs from scrutiny and preserves authority without requiring evidence. Historical revisionism is another tool. Harmful events such as inquisitions, crusades, or religious wars are minimized, sanitized, or blamed on individuals rather than systemic issues. These patterns suggest structural flaws within institutions, not isolated anomalies. When power is centralized and unaccountable, harm becomes embedded. The selective rewriting of history protects belief systems from criticism and maintains authority through control of narrative. Scientific appropriation is commonly employed to give credibility to religious claims. Terms from physics, cosmology, or biology, quantum energy, fine-tuning, or information theory are co-opted to justify ancient doctrines. This is superficial. The methodology of science, with testable hypotheses, falsification, and iterative refinement, is absent. Dressing myths in scientific terminology improves persuasiveness without improving accuracy. Religion adopts the appearance of authority without engaging in evidence-based practice. Projection is another tactic, where believers accuse others of flaws that exist within their own framework. For example, non-believers may be labeled as close-minded, dogmatic, or morally bankrupt, even when they are not bound to any specific belief system. Secularism is sometimes mischaracterized as just another religion, falsely equating disbelief with adherence. Non-belief is simply the absence of a specific claim, not the construction of an alternative doctrine. The overarching pattern is the illusion of certainty. Religion often promises knowledge about ultimate truths, what happens after death, the purpose of life, and the nature of reality. This certainty is borrowed from authority, repetition, and emotional reinforcement, not evidence. It feels comforting, but it suppresses curiosity, inquiry, and intellectual growth. Admitting I don't know is not weakness. It is the starting point for genuine understanding. Inquiry thrives in uncertainty, not in unquestioned dogma. In addition to these mechanisms, organized religion offers meaning, moral guidance, and purpose, while simultaneously discouraging independent reasoning. By substituting external authority for personal investigation, individuals are conditioned to accept prepackaged answers rather than seeking evidence or developing understanding. Faith rewards conformity and emotional reassurance, but critical thinking is treated as a threat. Dogma is valued over discovery, certainty over curiosity. This creates identity entanglement, where questioning becomes a personal threat. Belief is tied to self-worth, community, and eternal destiny, so doubt feels like betrayal. Reason and evidence are filtered through emotion and social expectation. This psychological leverage ensures that ideas are insulated from critique, independent of their actual validity. Finally, organized religion thrives on a combination of psychological, social, and logical mechanisms. Survivorship bias, false urgency, virtue by association, emotional conditioning, linguistic ambiguity, historical revisionism, scientific appropriation, projection, and the illusion of certainty. These factors stabilize belief not because it is objectively true, but because questioning is discouraged and conformity is rewarded. Religious systems maintain authority through repetition, ritual, emotional influence, social reinforcement, and identity entanglement, rather than through evidence or reasoning. Yet, despite these layers of reinforcement, reality does not require belief to be meaningful or moral. Life, relationships, creativity, learning, exploration, and compassion provide purpose and value without reliance on dogma. Meaning can be created, not merely received. Morality can be grounded in empathy, reason, and shared human experience, rather than divine command. Curiosity and inquiry are tools for understanding the universe, not threats to be suppressed. Truth does not demand obedience. It demands evidence and critical thinking. Certainty is never guaranteed, but understanding grows through exploration, questions, and the courage to embrace the unknown. In the end, organized religion presents a house of cards built on logical fallacies, emotional manipulation, social pressure, and the illusion of certainty. It offers comfort, identity, and answers, but often at the cost of curiosity, independence, and critical thinking. Real knowledge, moral responsibility, and personal growth emerge not from unquestioned belief, but from engagement with evidence, reflection, and the courage to confront uncertainty. Life's mysteries are not resolved by dogma. They are explored through inquiry, reason, and the continual pursuit of understanding. Building on these ideas, it's crucial to examine how religion's the narrative of human purpose and cosmic significance. Many religious systems present humans as the central focus of creation, implying that the universe exists primarily for our benefit. This anthropocentric view is deeply self-centered and ignores the overwhelming evidence of a vast, indifferent cosmos. Trillions of galaxies stretch across space, most of which are hostile to life. Earth is an infinitesimal speck in this immense universe, and framing it as the center of divine concern is not humility, it's ego. This perspective appeals to human vanity rather than reason, offering comfort at the expense of accuracy. Closely related is teleological thinking, the assumption that everything has inherent purpose, often assigned by a deity. Religion teaches that events, good or bad, happen for us or to teach us lessons. A lion kills a gazelle not as part of cosmic morality. Hurricanes do not target the morally deserving. Nature operates without intent. Meaning is human-created, not divinely assigned. This distinction is essential. Constructing purpose through choice and reflection produces authentic meaning, unlike externally imposed narratives that justify suffering or privilege. Religion also leverages historical authority by implying that widespread belief in antiquity validates doctrine. Ancient civilizations believed in gods, revered natural phenomena, or adhered to social hierarchies now recognized as harmful. Popularity or tradition does not equal truth. People once thought the sun revolved around the earth. Epilepsy was demonic possession, and slavery was natural. The persistence of ideas proves human capacity for transmission, not the correctness of belief. Public discourse often introduces false balance in discussions about religion. Critics are expected to offer praise to maintain perceived neutrality, even when evidence overwhelmingly favors skepticism. In classrooms or debates, religious claims are sometimes given equal weight with empirical science. This misrepresents reality. Not all ideas are equally valid. Treating belief as morally or intellectually equivalent to evidence-based reasoning misleads learners and undermines critical thinking. Authority structures in religion reveal additional contradictions. If God is perfect and omniscient, why rely on flawed intermediaries? Priests, prophets, popes, or texts riddled with errors. Complex languages, mistranslations, and centuries of human mediation complicate the transmission of supposed eternal truths. These inconsistencies challenge the logic of divine communication, revealing that religious authority often rests on human structures rather than on unassailable insight. Vagueness in religious claims further protects belief from scrutiny. Terms like spirit, divine energy, or soul are undefined, allowing virtually any interpretation. Ask 10 believers to define the soul, and you will get 10 different answers. If a concept cannot be clearly defined, it cannot be tested, and if it cannot be tested, it cannot be claimed as real. Vagueness functions as a shield, preventing falsification while maintaining the appearance of depth. Moral blackmail is another tool used to suppress critique. Religious institutions often portray questioning as offensive, irreverent, or disrespectful. This tactic conflates the right to hold a belief with the belief itself. Respecting individuals does not necessitate unquestioning acceptance of their doctrines. Ideas should be examined critically. Power should not be conferred upon claims that cannot endure scrutiny. False analogies are frequently employed. For example, comparing the universe to a watch to argue for a designer overlooks key differences. A watch is man-made, finite, and understood. The universe is vast, naturally occurring, and unparalleled. Analogies may illustrate concepts, but they do not substitute for evidence. Redefining terms strategically, such as nothing or atheism, to support theological arguments similarly misleads. Precision in language is vital when evaluating truth claims. Appeal to consequence is another common tactic. Claims like life is meaningless without God or morality collapses without faith leverage fear or comfort rather than evidence. While emotionally compelling, these arguments do not establish truth. The universe is indifferent. The existence of meaning or morality is independent of our desire for cosmic reassurance. Belief in divine design is often justified through incredulity. I cannot imagine how this happened naturally, so it must be God. Yet, imagination is not proof. Improbable events do occur, and humans are poorly equipped to intuitively grasp large-scale probability. Life, evolution, and cosmic events can appear miraculous without requiring supernatural causation. Probabilistic understanding demonstrates that complexity and unlikely outcomes do not imply intentional design. Religious language frequently employs a bait-and-switch. Abstract, philosophical concepts, like the first cause or cosmic principle, gradually morph into specific deities with commandments, rituals, and narratives. This shift is subtle but critical. Establishing a beginning for the universe does not logically validate a particular god, nor a system of moral edicts. Conflating abstract cosmology with concrete religious doctrine misrepresents the evidence and undermines rational inquiry. Moral outsourcing is another issue. When morality is defined solely by divine command, personal responsibility is removed. Acts are judged right or wrong based on obedience rather than ethical reasoning. This framework enables extreme outcomes. Genocide, slavery, and intolerance can all be justified if seen as divinely sanctioned. True morality requires independent judgment, guided by empathy, logic, and shared human values, not blind compliance. Religious teachings often distort humility, framing humans as inherently sinful or broken and dependent on divine authority. This form of humility promotes dependency and guilt rather than self-reflection and growth. Real humility acknowledges limitations, recognizes potential error, and embraces the possibility of learning and evolving. Confusing obedience with virtue creates a fragile moral framework, reliant on external authority. The halo effect further strengthens uncritical adherence. Religious leaders, texts, and institutions are often assumed trustworthy due to their perceived sanctity. Charisma, tradition, or symbolic authority are mistaken for correctness. History demonstrates countless instances of clerical abuse or error, revealing that moral appearance does not equate to epistemic reliability. The content of a claim, not the perceived virtue of the claimant, determines truth. Falsifiability is often absent in religious belief. Claims that cannot be tested, challenged, or disproven constitute a belief bubble. Outcomes are interpreted to fit the narrative. Success is divine favor. Failure is a test of faith. Such systems explain everything without predicting anything, rendering them scientifically meaningless. Real knowledge requires testability. Without it, belief remains anecdotal. False attribution credits religion with achievements in morality, art, and law, ignoring their existence independent of divine sanction. Ethical systems, cultural artifacts, and societal structures predate organized religion and flourish without it. Secular frameworks provide fairness, justice, and creativity without invoking supernatural authority. Human achievements are not contingent on religious endorsement. Finally, faith itself embodies a foundational fallacy, valuing belief without evidence as a virtue. Faith substitutes surrender for inquiry, certitude for curiosity, and obedience for understanding. While it offers emotional comfort and social cohesion, it impedes intellectual autonomy. Truth, by contrast, is evidence-based, provisional, and responsive to new information. Faith may demand compliance, but reason demands engagement. In sum, organized religion leverages a complex web of psychological, social, and logical mechanisms. Identity entanglement, survivorship bias, false urgency, emotional conditioning, linguistic ambiguity, historical revisionism, scientific appropriation, projection, and the illusion of certainty to maintain belief. These strategies stabilize faith, not because it reflects reality, but because they discourage doubt, inquiry, and independent thought. Understanding requires evidence, reflection, and courage in the face of uncertainty. Life's meaning, morality, and purpose emerge not from imposed doctrines, but through exploration, empathy, reasoning, and human creativity. Ultimately, examining organized religion through the lens of logical scrutiny, critical thinking, and evidence reveals a striking pattern. What appears as eternal wisdom is often built on fallacies, emotional manipulation, and social reinforcement. Religion offers answers to the deepest questions: why we exist, what our purpose is, what happens after death. But too often, these answers are borrowed rather than earned. They rely on repetition, authority, fear, hope, and identity, not on reasoned inquiry. When we peel away these layers, what remains is a system that prioritizes certainty over understanding, obedience over curiosity, and conformity over independent thought. The psychological mechanisms at work are subtle but profound. Religion leverages identity entanglement. Belief is intertwined with self-worth, community acceptance, and even perceived eternal destiny. Doubt is framed as betrayal, curiosity as disloyalty. Survivorship bias ensures that we hear stories of miraculous lives and moral exemplars, but we rarely hear of harm, coercion, or abuse. This creates a skewed perception. Faith appears consistently rewarding, when in reality it is selective narratives that are visible. False urgency amplifies this effect, pressuring individuals to decide quickly, without reflection, under the guise of eternal stakes. Emotional conditioning links belief to safety, love, and reward, while doubt triggers fear, guilt, and social exclusion. Together, these forces shape minds to accept dogma before reason, to trust authority before evidence, and to value belonging over truth. Language is another key tool. Religious texts are often vague, metaphorical, and poetic, allowing multiple interpretations that make claims unfalsifiable. Words like soul, spirit, divine energy, and eternal grace carry resonance but little precision. They obscure rather than clarify, enabling believers to see what they wish and ignore what challenges their faith. Historical revisionism sanitizes uncomfortable truths, rebranding atrocities or systemic harm as isolated incidents or misinterpretations. Scientific appropriation rebrands myths in modern terminology, quantum energy, fine-tuning, or information theory, to appear credible, while projection deflects criticism, labeling skeptics as closed-minded or morally deficient. Each tactic reinforces belief without engaging with evidence, creating a protective bubble around ideas. Even when evidence challenges doctrine, religion often moves the goalposts. Failed prophecies are reinterpreted, unanswered prayers are framed as divine tests, and literal texts become metaphorical when contradicted. This slipperiness ensures that claims are effectively immune to falsification, sustaining the illusion of certainty. Pascal's wager encourages fear-based belief, treating faith as a gamble rather than a reasoned conclusion. Moral outsourcing shifts responsibility from human judgment to divine command, allowing actions to be justified without ethical analysis. Humility is conflated with submission, obedience with virtue, and faith with moral superiority. Halo effects and appeals to authority lend credibility based on perception rather than evidence, further insulating belief from critique. Despite all this, uncertainty is not weakness. Saying, "I don't know," is an act of intellectual honesty. Acknowledging limits, exploring questions, and remaining open to evidence is the path to understanding. True inquiry does not seek comfort in dogma, but embraces discomfort as a guide. Complexity, ambiguity, and randomness are intrinsic to life, and navigating them requires reason, reflection, and courage. Real meaning emerges not from ancient texts or imposed doctrines, but from relationships, creativity, empathy, learning, and conscious choice. Morality is cultivated through cooperation, reflection, and shared human experience, not decrees from authority. Purpose is found in the projects, passions, and connections we actively build, not in stories handed down for centuries. Understanding the patterns of logical fallacies in religion empowers us to approach life with clarity. Recognizing appeals to ignorance, circular reasoning, special pleading, false dilemmas, confirmation bias, emotional manipulation, and illusory certainty helps separate truth from comfort. It clarifies that beliefs should be judged on their coherence, evidence, and capacity to withstand scrutiny. Life does not require sanctification to be meaningful. The universe need not be anthropocentric to inspire awe. Morality need not be divine to guide ethical living. By embracing reason, questioning assumptions, and evaluating claims critically, we reclaim the ability to navigate life autonomously, responsibly, and creatively. This is not a call to abandon all spiritual reflection. Inquiry, awe, and contemplation can coexist with skepticism. Human beings naturally seek meaning, pattern, and connection. Appreciating art, nature, or shared rituals can provide profound fulfillment without relying on untested claims. Mindfulness, meditation, and ethical practice can cultivate empathy and resilience independently of divine authority. The difference lies in grounding experiences and choices in reason, evidence, and personal responsibility, rather than in inherited narratives and emotional coercion. Now is the moment to act consciously. Reflect on your beliefs, not merely as inherited cultural artifacts, but as claims that can be examined, tested, and justified. Ask difficult questions. Why do I believe this? What evidence supports it? How might my beliefs shape my actions, my relationships, or my understanding of the world? Be willing to hold beliefs tentatively, open to revision as understanding grows. Embrace uncertainty as a tool rather than a threat. Recognize the psychological pressures that have shaped your thinking and disentangle identity from ideology. By doing so, you reclaim intellectual autonomy and the freedom to construct meaning deliberately and authentically. Share this approach with others. Foster environments where questioning is welcomed, not punished. Encourage discussion grounded in reason, evidence, and empathy. Model curiosity and humility. Understand that meaningful change is cumulative. Challenging a single fallacy may not overturn centuries of cultural reinforcement, but cultivating critical thinking and emotional resilience can transform communities over time. Supporting others in evaluating claims rationally creates a culture where belief is a choice informed by evidence rather than a reflex shaped by authority or fear. Finally, live the principles you value. Build a life that reflects your understanding of reality, your ethical reasoning, and your personal goals. Cultivate empathy, pursue knowledge, and engage meaningfully with the world around you. Recognize that meaning, morality, and purpose are not gifts to receive, they are tasks to undertake, continuously and deliberately. Life is finite, unpredictable, and complex. Facing this reality with courage, reason, and curiosity is both a challenge and a liberation. It allows you to act authentically, make responsible decisions, and create a legacy defined by understanding rather than inherited certainty. The essence of this journey is simple but profound. Truth does not require obedience, evidence does not demand fear, and understanding thrives on inquiry, not dogma. The universe will not bend to comfort or expectation. It offers no guarantees of reward, no scripted purpose, and no preordained meaning. What it offers is freedom. The freedom to question, to explore, and to build a life that matters on your terms. In this freedom, you find both responsibility and opportunity. You are not a passive recipient of meaning. You are its architect. You are not bound by inherited certainty. You are empowered by reason, and you are not limited by fear of doubt. You are liberated by curiosity. Take this knowledge and apply it. Examine every claim, especially those that promise absolute answers. Evaluate evidence. Question assumptions, and reflect on your motivations. Seek communities that encourage rational discourse, not blind allegiance. Practice humility, not through submission, but through acknowledgement of your fallibility and openness to learning. Create moral frameworks based on empathy, reason, and shared human experience. Embrace the vastness and indifference of the cosmos as an opportunity to define your own purpose. And above all, stay curious. Let your questions guide you. Let uncertainty challenge you, and let reason illuminate your path. In doing so, you move beyond inherited narratives and emotional manipulation. You replace borrowed certainty with earned understanding. You trade fear for clarity, obedience for responsibility, and dogma for inquiry. Life becomes meaningful because you choose to make it so. Purpose is profound because it is deliberate. Morality is authentic because it is reasoned, and knowledge becomes powerful because it is pursued, not assumed. This is the freedom that awaits when you step beyond the illusions of certainty and embrace the challenge and the opportunity of thinking for yourself.